Well, we've been talking about it for so long, and now we can finally say it is here. The first weekend of official visits for South Carolina is this weekend. And Wes, we have talked about this for a minute, a hot minute, as the cool kids say. But now we are finally here. It's finally time. But before we get into who's coming, what's going to happen, all of the details about this weekend, how
You're
are
gonna
you?
keep making them wait, Kendall? I'm great. I'm great. Are you great?
I'm great. It's the recruiting rundown here on Gamecock Central. How could I not be great? Kendall Smith,
We're both
Wes
great.
Mitchell, joining
Let's
you
dive
here.
in.
Yes, let's get right into it because we've talked about it for so long and now we are finally here. And this is so exciting because we are kicking off a very busy month for South Carolina in terms of recruiting. The month of June is always quite hectic, and this weekend things kick off with official visits. So, Wes, we'll start off by saying that if people want to see the full list of who is expected to come this weekend, head to GamecockCentral.com. But we do have a list. Who stands out to you in terms of who's coming this weekend for an OV?
Yeah, so 8 total visitors right now, Kendall, that are expected in this weekend. Always a chance of a last minute tweak here or there, but for the most part, I think the list is what the list is going to be. And, I got to start with a guy we've talked about here before, and that is Carter Meadows. He's an on-3 5-star. He, according to On3, is the number 6 overall prospect in the country, the number 2 edge prospect in the country. And once again, South Carolina trying to break into that DMV pipeline that has been so good to them over the last few years. And, this is somewhere Sterling Lucas. It was a little bit, I would say, quiet in terms of South Carolina's involvement here, but the Gamecocks, kind of as they sometimes do, have quietly worked their magic. They've stayed in the process with him. And he put out recently kind of the 4 schools he wants to go see. South Carolina is one of only 4 schools right now who are going to get one of those official visits, and they will get the chance to kind of set the tone here early in the summer for him this weekend. He was on campus with his family for multiple days leading up to kind of that spring game. I think that served as a nice appetizer for Carolina in terms of setting the table for him and what they're probably going to talk about this weekend. So we'll see what that ends up looking like, but clearly kind of a top of the board type guy, someone that is incredibly highly rated and that fans could get excited about if South Carolina could land him.
Yeah, absolutely, Wes. And it's interesting. You talk about him coming a little bit earlier on in the summer. I'm curious, just from your perspective, what do you think is better? Do you think it matters if guys are coming earlier and then going to schools after they visit South Carolina, or if South Carolina is that final school that they take an official visit for? Like, maybe it doesn't matter at all, but to you, is there a way that you would like it to go for certain guys that are thinking about South Carolina?
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons to both sides. The pro of getting that early visit is sometimes players don't even they might be scheduled to take other visits. They may not actually take them. So if you can go ahead and just set the tone very early, you can set a very high bar for the other visits and sometimes even go ahead and get the prospect committed. On the other hand, most people typically kind of, subscribe to that theory of you want the last visit. I would say all things being equal, especially if a prospect maybe has, a visit set, then a visit set and then decision date set to where he's kind of locked into I'm going to take all my visits. I'd say maybe give me the last visit on that guy. But certainly if you're South Carolina, these guys are coming in terms of this week, a lot of them kind of early on in that stretch of visits. So what you want to do is go ahead and make it very difficult on those other schools to match you. Like when they're taking their visits next week and the week after, you want for them to be comparing it to South Carolina and be going, well, maybe South Carolina did that a little bit better.
Yeah, have the opportunity to set the bar pretty high. And Wes, it's interesting. A lot of people are like, what happens on an official visit? What does this weekend look like? Obviously, you're trying to get some time with the coaches, and you don't want to have the group be too big. And that's something we've talked about on the recruiting rundown for years now, is South Carolina has specific numbers of guys they want to have out on these official visits so they can carve out time for each individual guy. But other than that, other than chatting with the coaches, having conversations about what the future could look like at South Carolina, what else goes down on these official visits?
Yeah, a lot of it is spending that time with the staff. But basically, if you took any unofficial visit they've ever taken, this is like taking that and just multiplying it, and to the extent that you really want for them to leave your campus feeling like they got to look at everything. So there's going to be some academics involved. There's going to be some just team bonding type stuff where you really want to allow the student athletes to go just spend time with their potential future teammates. No coaches around, no kind of just no structure almost. Like you just want them to hang out with the guys and see if it's something they would enjoy. And I always look at it, it's almost split, Kendall. Like the parents are getting kind of one visit and the players are simultaneously taking like a different visit, I feel like, and then some of it is together, of course. So you're going to have a lot of great food, of course. There's going to be a lot of, a lot of recruiting pitches just in terms of, hey, this is how we're going to use you in the offense. This is how your day-to-day would be in terms of academics. This is how we see you fitting in, even from like an NIL resources standpoint, more and more, that's something that can be talked about. So it will be very in-depth. You really want for these guys and their families, their parents to leave with no questions left. This is an answer all your questions, all hands on deck, push everything into the middle of the table type weekend. And certainly South Carolina will hope to do that with all these guys. I did want to mention before we get out of here, Kendall, too, a couple of other guys, because I was looking through the list. I was like, obviously Carter Meadows, big name. I don't want to mention just one, though. A couple of other guys I'm intrigued by. Kari Adams, who is the number 65 prospect in the entire country, number 8 cornerback in the country. He'll be in town. Not one that has like taken a bunch of visits to South Carolina in the past. So I think it's always interesting when guys are still able to learn something new about your school on these official visits. Maybe you can kind of make a big jump there. And then someone I feel like South Carolina has just a lot of momentum with, and he's a little bit newer on the radar, but he's visited a couple of times in the last few months, is KJ Johnson. He's someone I'm going to be keeping very close tabs on how this visit goes. Ole Miss has been heavily involved. Mississippi State heavily involved. He's an Alabama kid that fits that Torian Gray mold. Tall, athletic, long, lean. Was a little bit under the radar. Was way under the radar when South Carolina offered. Didn't even have an on-3 profile yet. But now you have all these other SEC schools coming after him. And I think that early attention from Torian Gray has gone a long way so far for South Carolina. So he's going to take his visits, but he's someone that I think the Gamecocks should really maybe knock it out of the park with this weekend and try to close in on possibly landing him in the class ultimately.
Well, it is interesting because we've seen in the past South Carolina kind of give guys attention early in their recruiting process, and that ends up working out well for the Gamecocks. So we'll see how everything goes this weekend. And as always, Wes and Chris do a great job of getting feedback from these guys that come on official visits. We'll hear from a ton of them once the weekend is over. So stay tuned at GamecockCentral.com. And again, that full list is over at GamecockCentral.com as well. But yes, these weekends are massive and a ton of planning goes into them. I mean, there is a lot going on from basically the start of the day until the very end of the day. There's something in the schedule for these guys because you got to impress them. Now more and more, with everything going on in the landscape of college football, you have to pull out all of the stops at these official visits. That's exactly what South Carolina intends to do here this weekend as we get ready for the first OB weekend of summer of 2025. I'm excited about it, Wes, and we're going to be talking a lot about official visits over the next few weeks. So please stay updated with us over here on the Recruiting Rundown. We'll give you kind of a shorter synopsis of everything that's happening. And then for more in-depth stuff, you can head over again to GamecockCentral.com and follow us on social media at Gamecock Central. Though we hope you all have an amazing rest of your week. We appreciate you joining us here on the Recruiting Rundown. For Wes Mitchell, I'm Kendall Smith. It's time for some official visits in Columbia, South Carolina, and we can't wait. We'll see you next week on the Recruiting Rundown.